Hello and welcome to Retech, and today we're going to cover something that I've been planning on covering for a while. And I had a copy of USpeech by Currah, and I kind of got hold of it, tried to make sure that it all worked, plugged it all in, and I had a fault with this unit, so I had to wait until another one came up. Now I'm going to fix this one hopefully at some point, but it is something that I really wanted to kind of try out because I've heard kind of mixed things about this speech system on here, and I'm not going to go massively into depth, but I don't think that it's as bad as it's made out to be, or what certain people have made it out to be, because it was very popular and there was a couple of games written for this particular speech system, and it also includes a couple of games on the cassette, or at least one adventure game anyway, and I would like to kind of try it out. Now the biggest difference is that it pushes the sound out via the little Currah speech system interface through to the TV, so it's quite novel in that way, and I kind of wondered whether or not it would push the sound out for anything else, such as games, etc., which is something I might try. But it pushes the sound out to the TV via RF, so if you've composite modded a ZX Spectrum, then this isn't going to work. Now it's cassette based, and it's kind of the usual fare really for this period in time. Now, using the instruction book from the working unit, first off I have to apologise for the snowy screen on here, because this monitor is not brilliant at locking on to an RF signal from a ZX Spectrum, but I didn't want to use a CRT because you get loads of rolling banding, so it's something we'll probably have to put up with a little bit. But you know, it doesn't really affect it and it sounds really good. Now this manual is very thin that comes with it. It's only about half a dozen pages or so really of useful information, and it works on the Allophone system. Now for people who don't know what the Allophone system is, in kind of a simple terms, it's basically the way you speak, because it groups together sounds like ooh and ah, and it also groups together complex allophones, such as, I'll read a few out just to give you an idea, like ear as in clear, as in as in purr. It also says ooh as in food, so you can kind of get an idea of the way it's grouping things together. So sh as in ship. So it works on that principle. It groups together sounds to create what we perceive as a human voice, but it also splits them up. You've got complex allophones, and you've also got what's called strong phonetic allophones, such as d and b and h and I. So you've got, according to this, you've got r as in run, y as in yeah, or y as in yeah in this case. So to get that kind of sound, it is y on this system, so double y to get the yeah sound. And you've got things like the two sound, which is two t's on this system to produce that two t sound. And it also, such as bat, it's b, so bat, and that's the way it works. So it's kind of a very good system, but it's a little bit limited, because modern speech synthesis takes speech patterns rather than just allophones, and whether they're complex or not. So it kind of works, and it's one of the early systems of speech, and it wasn't just the ZX Spectrum that could do it. The humble ZX81 could do it with a speech pack as well, so could a lot of other machines. And you know, it tended to work and it tended to get the ball moving into more kind of complex speech generation. So yeah, the Allophone system, it's not flawed, but it's limited, and that's what you would expect for a machine which is, in this case, 48K, and in the case of other machines, you actually get basic speech working on very little memory using this system. So it wasn't as bad as it sounds, and so we're going to have a listen to it, and we're going to run it on a very different ZX Spectrum. So let's take a look. So the first thing you might notice is this is not a UK spec or a normal ZX Spectrum. This is a Sinclair ZX Spectrum. This is a very rare model. It was not released into the wild as such. It was more of a pre-production model before you got the Timex Sinclair models, and it's a nice little system. It's different in a way that it's got the fluting across the top of the case and a silver Sinclair ZX Spectrum badge. It is effectively a clone machine. It was produced and sold in countries like Portugal, but it wasn't officially released into the wild. This then became the 2048, and then later the Timex Sinclair model, which was produced for the American market. But this is 100% compatible with the ZX Spectrum. The reason I use this is because this hasn't been modified for composite. This is just a straight RF model, which you need for this Currah speech and sound system. Okay, so you might see there's a couple of lines on the screen already. You've got hi there, and you've also got a welcome note. Now, the first thing you notice when you plug this thing, it talks to you about absolutely everything. So I'm going to put the volume up a little bit. You'll hear a little bit of a buzzing, but it's something that I can't really do away with because it's coming through RF. So if I type, let's see, go to AND space LDT space US space HAV space. You can see it says everything you do, so even delete, which is quite comical. Load, okay, so you know everything from clear. See, that's quite unusual because it knows what CLS really means. So these have already been pre-programmed in its memory, so to speak, basically. So it knows what the ZX keyboard should really sound like. For example, step 2, then power plus not equalator or equal less than equalator. So it's quite good. It's quite novel. I mean, I kind of can see where this might come into its own if you were, you know, a little bit sight impaired and you know where the keys are, but you want to basically make sure that what you're doing is correct. So, you know, you can close your eyes and do. Space, enter. Okay, or you can just do. Space, print, float, HI, space, THERB. And I'm actually just doing this with my eyes closed, and I'm facing the camera, so I'm not trying to kind of cheat. I'm actually just typing away blind, and it kind of works. Let's see. I space C A N space H A C R. You can get it wrong. You can hear it instantly. So yeah, it's I think it does really well. So if you doing anything so if you're doing anything at all on this machine, you can actually just hear it chatting away to you, and I would think that would have been a boon if you were a little bit sight impaired. So again, I can kind of see the advantage of this. The only problem I have with this is maybe it's just through time. This cartridge, it's got a bit of the old RAM pack wobble, which wasn't really a big thing on the Spectrum like it was on the ZX81, but it does have some, so you have to be very careful by not bashing it too much. And if you were to use this and this was your primary kind of machine, I would kind of think about silicon the actual unit into the case, so you could peel it off later and it wouldn't damage the case, but it would hold it in place. So there you go, this is how it works, and it is quite a good system. So if we want to run this little program, it's just basically hi there, welcome programs, you know. So we'll run this. You can hear what it does, and every key press you do, it's kind of interfering with it. So if I do there we go, turn it off by using that key equals 0, and then you get, we'll run the same thing, and it's not too bad. I don't think it deserved the kind of derision that some people gave this, because it's no worse than something that the BBC Micro produced at the time, a very similar system. It's no worse than any other platform, and if you listen really carefully you can actually hear it, and that's without going too far into the Allophone system. So it's not too bad. So we'll edit line 10 and we'll basically change that. Try that. And it doesn't quite fit. It's a very cumbersome system. The other way is and it gets even worse. So to work out your Allophone system, you have to take the little manual and flick through it and then try and figure out what set of keys represent what set of allophones on here. So it's very cumbersome to use. Now I did say that it's not any worse than maybe on a BBC Micro, but if you use speech on a BBC Micro, it seems to be a little bit more intuitive, and it seems to know that when you put in hi in there with a double I or similar, it will pronounce it as I instead of I. So there are a few technical differences between the two. So if I look through here, yeah, double I should produce the I as in hive, but it didn't. It didn't work quite as intended. So it's a case of just messing about with it really, and then trying to find out what works and what doesn't. So if I delete this, now basic sounds like hello works fine.
Hello.
And you can understand that straight away. Hello. It's very short, but it works. It's when you get into more complex sounding allophones is where you really have to do a bit of a hit and miss, but it does work, and I actually think it's quite good, especially for its time. And then there's the dreaded RAM pack wobble. So again, you can see how it's not very good or very stable. Okay, and there we go, it's back up and running. So you got to be very gentle with this RAM pack. It could just be time, but the connections were never brilliant, I don't think, on these things anyway. So yeah, this is how it works, and it's interesting. It's very interesting to see how far we've actually come. DK-Tronics were the people who brought you things like the keyboards for the ZX Spectrum and ZX81. They also brought a lot of joystick interfaces and other interfaces to the market, which were very, very popular at the time. And DK-Tronics also had a big line of software, and because of the popularity of the USpeech, originally by Currah, they introduced the speech into their own software, so it's compatible with a lot of DK-Tronics software and also a lot of other titles. But there's a little bit of an issue with playing some games on the ZX Spectrum if you have one of these units plugged into it, because this adapter or this speech system occupies about 256 bytes of memory, exactly where a lot of the games put their start for their programs. So basically, if it does that, you run into compatibility problems, and that kind of causes a few issues. And the other problem was with this system, with the cartridge, the way it plugged into the Spectrum, there was no pass-through. That was primarily a cost-cutting exercise to basically make them affordable, because they were selling at about £29, give or take any discounts at the time, which it wasn't that expensive for what it was, even at the time, but it did cause a few problems. But as you could see from the game,
Intruder alert. Intruder alert.
the speech is a little hit and miss. The Allophone system, although doesn't rely on spelling or grammar or anything like that, it basically relies on sound, as in how you say the words, as I explained before. But it does cause a little bit of problem in trying to get the speech correct, because you have to kind of orally say the words and try and match the speech software to it. Now, that in itself was never a kind of a deal breaker, because, as I said, a lot of software took advantage of the USpeech system by Currah. So overall, it was quite a popular system, and it was a bit of a success, really, because it put speech and the idea of speech and the application of speech into the hands of a lot of Spectrum owners at the time for a relatively low cost. So I'm quite glad in the end that I've actually got one of these. And as I said, the system where it actually speaks the keys, the key presses, is fantastic if you're a little bit visually impaired. But I'm kind of guessing that for a lot of the time it gets on people's nerves after a while if they're typing away on their ZX Spectrum and it's saying every key press, and the novelty of that kind of wears off a little bit, and it wears off quite soon. It was the early days of speech synthesis and the early days of picking a system such as the Allophone system, etc., and early days of creating something that humans could potentially understand and understand well. But it didn't quite cut it, really. As much as I wanted this to be a really good product and something that, you know, I could probably use in writing something, or, you know, doing something with the little ones, making them kind of realize where speech came from, I think this might actually put them off. I think it might put them off of using speech systems on microcomputers such as these, because in a very short space of time, speech kind of came on leaps and bounds, especially as we kind of migrated into the 16-bit era. And also sampling, even on the 8-bit machines, was a lot clearer and a lot better for the ear than this was. But I don't want to be down on it, because it was the first kind of iteration of this kind of speech on a microcomputer, especially an 8-bit microcomputer, which you know, to be honest, was limited in memory, limited in processor power, limited in sound, because remember, the original ZX Spectrum didn't have a speaker or a built-in sound system that could actually push out speech at that kind of clarity. And I know you're going to say it's not very clear, but believe me, compared to a beeper speaker, it's leaps and bounds above that system. So yeah, I quite liked it. I liked playing around with it. I liked what it could do, and it was nice to go back in to see where it all started from. And I'm glad I've got a working one. I've also got one to repair, so that might be another video for sometime in the future. But also, it was nice to get out my Sinclair ZX Spectrum, my very rare, strange looking ZX Spectrum, and give it a bit of a use. Now, I've had this for many years now, and I think it's probably been used about 5 or 6 times, which is a shame. But again, it's also potentially preserving it as well. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I hope it didn't put you off trying to find one of these, because they are very hard to come by in working condition, and they're getting very rare now. So if you find one, grab it, have some fun with it, frighten the cat, you know, frighten your friends, and really learn how allophones kind of work. It's much more difficult than it looks when it's written down on paper, because it doesn't quite sound the way you hear it in your head. So anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. See you soon, and thank you. See you. Bye bye.